All right, what's going on, everyone? And welcome back to Chuck's Contractor Corner. I'm your host, Chuck. And today I've got Jordan Smith from Storm Equipment. Jordan, really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So before we kind of get fully started here, why don't you let our audience know where you're calling in from? And more importantly, and this is a question I ask every outdoor contractor, what's the weather like out there down in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I'm in southern Minnesota, specifically just outside of Mankato, Minnesota, which is about an hour south of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And the weather is very enigmatic this year. It's been from hot to cold to hot to cold to hot to cold. So yesterday was 90 degrees and sunny. We're down in the 60s right now, and it's going to be rainy. That's kind of just the pattern we've been following here the last couple weeks.
Yeah, yeah. No, obviously weather patterns, shift and change. I know up our near our way in just outside of Ottawa, we've had a pretty wet spring so far. So a lot of the outdoor lawn and landscaping guys are obviously feeling the squeeze and working weekends and long evenings, trying to make up some time, right? So it's obviously something that we all deal with, but it is what it is. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your kind of little project that you have going on with storm chasing in that video series? I've seen a few of the episodes, and it's pretty intriguing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how that started?
Yeah, storm chasing's been both extremely challenging and extremely fun. So essentially what it is it's a video docu-series about the snow industry. So think Deadliest Catch. A lot of people know Deadliest Catch, which highlights the crab fishing industry. It's an industry that no one would really think about unless there's all of a sudden a TV show about it. And, one of the pain points in my mind in the snow industry is that there is a lack of standards. And I also think that the people that hire us just have a lack of respect for what it takes to do the work that we do because they don't know how much goes into it. They don't know how much we invest into our equipment and our training and our people and how many hours we spend getting ready to go and do our work. I mean, I don't know the exact math here, but I would guess that for every hour we're on site working, there was at least 30 minutes that went into getting to that point where we're on site doing the work, meaning that, preseason prep of the equipment, preseason training, planning dispatch and call outs. Like there's just so much more work that goes into the work that we do than just dropping a blade and plowing snow. And actually, ironically, one of the things that really made me realize we need something like this is I was talking to a lady at the gym and mentioned that we had been snow plowing all night the night before and that I was tired. And she said, like, tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean you're snow plowing? Like you're doing the roads? I said, no, like parking lots, like this one, at the gym here. And this sounds crazy, but she literally told me like, oh, I just assumed that on the parking lots, like by morning, the snow just melted away. I didn't realize people actually had to come in and plow that. And like, that's insane. Like obviously just so aloof. It's crazy. Like that's the
Yeah.
extreme perspective. And most people are probably, somewhere in between that and having full knowledge. But point being, we wanted to create something deep enough and entertaining enough where we could get non-snow people to watch these episodes and learn more about what we do. Because if we can get them to understand what we do and what goes into it, that elevates our industry to the point where we gain the level of respect that I believe we deserve as what I believe to be an emergency service that should have better pay rates than what a lot of guys are getting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great insight into the show. And honestly, I've watched a few episodes myself as as a snow loving guy, and it's just it's action packed. I gotta say, you guys are doing a good job on the footage that you guys are putting out. Obviously, following different companies from different areas is obviously huge to kind of give just a different perspective. And obviously, I've for myself, obviously, I only own a residential snow company, right? So for me to kind of get the perspective and to learn the commercial side while already being involved in the industry is pretty interesting and fascinating to me, especially down in the States. Obviously, you guys got, there's just bigger population overall. Obviously, maybe not as much snow, but some of those areas that you're in, I think, get hit pretty hard, throughout the winter. So very interesting, and looking forward to the next episodes coming out for sure.
And residential is something we definitely want to highlight as well. It didn't make it onto the first season. We primarily focused on larger companies for the first season just to make sure we had plenty of content because we've never done this before. Producing a TV show, especially one that has to follow the weather is not easy. So, but yeah, residential, I mean, it's huge, man. Like that's how I started. That's how almost everyone starts. No one starts a snow business and starts plowing Amazon distribution centers, right? So like we definitely want to highlight the residential segment as well. We'll do that in future seasons.
Right on, right on. Well, I definitely look forward to that. So I guess let's go back to kind of the start of your kind of snow career, I guess we could call it. When did that start? How long you been in the industry, and tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know the exact date. I believe I was 12 or 13 years old. I made flyers, printed them, and handed them out in my neighborhood for lawn care, dog sitting, and snow shoveling. And actually got a few customers, like maybe two, honestly, in my whole neighborhood. But it was a start, and I was a kid, so anything was better than nothing, and anything was better than bagging groceries at the grocery store for $4 an hour, right? So that's what I did, and landed a few dog sitting gigs, a few mowing gigs just in my neighborhood. I obviously couldn't drive yet, so I was just, pushing the lawnmower over to their houses, or actually bigger lawns, riding my dad's lawnmower over there. Uh, Word started getting out with some of the friends of my neighbors, and all of a sudden, I had their friends who wanted stuff done away from my home. So then I had my parents driving me with my mower to go and do stuff and take care of stuff. Then a guy from my church heard that I was doing this kind of stuff and hired me to do some of his townhomes that he was building and managing. So, I don't want to make it sound like I was putting in 40-hour weeks when I was a teenager. I wasn't, or a young, under 16. I was probably working 5 to 10 hours a week, but it was my start, right? Once I got my driver's license, that's when things took off even more so. Then I could throw the push mower in the bed of the trunk of my Pontiac Grand Prix. I did not have a truck. I had a Pontiac Grand Prix. So threw the push mower and the weed whacker and the leaf blower in the back of that thing. And that was my mobile lawn care crew. Certainly not a high-end service provider, but just got the job done. Then in summer of 26, I went and worked for another landscaping company to learn a little bit more rounded skill set on, hardscaping, retaining walls, patios, that kind of stuff. Worked a summer for them while also doing the mowing accounts and work that I had. And then went to college. I thought I wanted to be like a business guy, big dreams of getting an MBA and being a corporate person. I don't know why I wanted that, but that's what I wanted. So I was in college, but had to pay for college. So I kept working, kept doing my thing. The summer after working for that other company, I joined forces with a friend of mine whose parents owned a garden center and just started taking in all the inbound leads and referrals from people in the garden center looking for hardscaping work. So just started doing retaining walls, patios, obviously did planting beds and landscape beds and that kind of stuff too. And the thing just took off. We did good work, took good care of people. We were probably too cheap. Didn't know we were too cheap. I didn't know how to price stuff correctly. I was a college kid. I had no overhead. No, I had some help. My dad was an entrepreneur as well. So I had the right insurance and I had the right stuff, but I was probably underpriced and did a good job. So we got a ton of work because we were cheap and did good work. Scaled that thing up throughout college. By the time I was a senior, I realized, and I guess I should mention during that process also started doing snow plowing with more than just a shovel and a snowblower. Actually bought a 1987 F350 with a Hinneker straight blade on it. That was my first commercial plowing rig.
Yeah.
Knocked on a few doors, bunch of residential accounts in the town I was in college at, and then also knocked on a few apartment complex doors and got their parking lots. That was kind of the start of the snow portion of that career. But throughout college, the thing just kept growing and growing. Graduated in 2010, right after that 2008 recession that we had here in the U.S., real bad recession. Again, had done well throughout that time because our overhead is low. We were cheap, so stayed plenty busy. Didn't have any employees or staff, so keeping one or two guys busy was pretty easy. That's when things kind of really exploded. We were, had a good reputation already, came out of college, hungry, ready to go, and started hiring friends and family to work for me and scale the operation. And by 2015, when things were just booming coming out of that recession, I would say we pretty much owned our market here for both landscape and snow services. Just timing was a big part of this. I started super early, super young, started gaining that reputation, learned the skills. I always tell entrepreneurs, there's no magic bullet. It is literally just doing a really good job for a really long time. And the longer you do the work and do a good job doing the work, the bigger and better it's going to get. And that's a lot of what my story is. It's just, I started when I was literally 12 or 13 and I just did it over and over and over and over again. And that meant by the time I was 22, I had the same experience as a normal entrepreneur or business owner who's in their mid 30s. So like, it's just, it's all
Yeah.
about time.
And I think a lot of landscapers, whether it be snow or lawns and landscapes, I think a lot of guys kind of start that way, right? They kind of start in their teens or their late teens where they're just kind of looking for side money, and their parents are just telling them to go out and make money and do something useful, right? I know for me, I started with a paper route at 9 years old because my dad essentially said, no, you're like, I signed you up on the flyer, like you're delivering 192 papers every Friday. And it kind of just started that way. So for me, in terms of work ethic, that really started right at 9 years old, right? Before I was able to go out and play with my friends on the Friday afternoon, I had to, I would get the flyers on Thursday. I would put them together and put all the flyers within the newspapers and then deliver them all on Friday, right? So I think a lot of lawn guys kind of start, that route and then kind of just build it up as they go. And eventually by, like you said, kind of their mid 20s or, they've got something, fairly established. So was there a point, I guess, between when you were kind of doing this as a side gig, and before fully starting out, was there kind of a defining moment there that kind of made you realize, you know what, like I'm going to start a real business with this and I'm going to really take off with this?
Yeah, I think it was, again, I wish I had like journaled this so I could give you accurate timelines, like fully accurate, but I believe it was somewhere between either my sophomore and junior year of college or my junior and senior year of college. It was at the point when we had so much work that I had to hire multiple employees.
Right.
In my mind, it was like I had my one buddy I was doing this with, the guy that his parents own the garden center. Like it was him and I, and that was the whole business, right? When we got to the point where it's like, man, I need to be in 4 places at once and I need more help. And I started, calling on old high school friends and college friends to do cash work on the weekends. Like that's when I knew, like, man, this could really scale and be a real thing. Because that was with turning away work. I was turning away a lot of work. And had I had the experience and capability to scale, I probably could have had 20 employees while I was in college, but
Right.
I wasn't ready for that. And
Yeah.
I don't regret not doing that, because I would have failed miserably. But yeah, that was probably it, is when I realized that there was unlimited work and that I just needed to hire more people to do it. That's when I realized we had opportunity to do something a lot bigger than going to get an MBA and sitting in a corporate office.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of guys starting out, I think, at an earlier age might kind of run into that where they just got too much work. And then you've got kind of the opposite where you've got guys in their mid 20s kind of taking a career change and quitting their job and starting out with, a lawn or landscape company. And then at that point, it's kind of the leads that they're lacking, right? They're, they like the work, they can do the work. It's just they don't have that foundation that they've set those years prior, right? With referrals and, as I mean, word of mouth is obviously huge in I would say most communities, but especially smaller communities, that travels fast. I know in our area, I'm in a town of about 8,000, so everybody knows everybody almost, and the new people moving in, kind of get to know other people, and eventually you kind of know everybody, right? So it's definitely, you definitely hear different stories of how guys have started out, but I definitely appreciate the guys that have started at a young age and kind of grown that. So, and I guess take us back to kind of those first initial years, kind of during college. What were some of the kind of the wins and the struggles throughout those times? What were some things that you guys did that were good, and maybe some issues that you guys kind of ran into in those initial days?
Yeah, I thought about this one a little bit, and honestly, I think the easiest big win I can tell you that probably laid a foundation for a lot of future success was, there was an older lady that we worked for. This would have been our first summer already. So like our first summer doing hardscape type work. And she wanted a retaining wall fixed. And we went to meet with her, and you could tell, her husband had passed away. She was widowed. You could tell she just wanted someone to talk to. She wanted a retaining wall done, but she also just wanted to talk. And the first thing she said is, "Thank you for calling me back and showing up. You're the first contractor who's called me back and actually showed up." And the next thing was, I spent an hour and a half just talking with her, and we spent 5 minutes on the retaining wall and an hour and 25 minutes on her husband and his business, his oil business he had, and how she's been coping with the loss of him. And it's like, it's not something that you would expect a landscaper or a lawn care guy to do. Human to human, like I love talking to people. It's just what I naturally do. But I didn't realize it was a business strategy, but it did make me realize, A, call back and show up for the appointment. That if you do that as a contractor, you're winning already, because
Hmm.
unfortunately a lot of contractors don't do that. Number two, build relationships with people outside of just a business transaction. So like focus on relationships. And honestly, it's like the natural human thing to do. But I think unfortunately in society now, everyone's in such a hurry and wants to do everything automated and by text message and by email, where there's just no interpersonal relationship building that gets prioritized anymore. And now keep in mind, this was like 2007, so social media and stuff was just starting. It wasn't quite the level it's at now, but that moment, thinking back, like that moment, I didn't realize it in the moment, but like that was a big deal, because now thinking back, she called us back every year to do thousands of dollars of work, like no bid, no competition. We're not pricing against anyone. Like that one day, that one conversation set a foundation for 8 more years of a substantial amount of landscape work that was just on autopilot, because I took that hour and a half just to chat with her and build a relationship. So building those relationships, and just again returning the call and being consistent and doing what you say you're going to do, like that's what a lot of this is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, and obviously the contractor space is kind of known to be, guys that are just kind of rough around the edges, and I think it's you kind of need that healthy mix between being sociable, being showing up, and kind of personalizing the experience a little bit, and obviously trying to scale and grow a business by automating things, right? I think there's a very fine balance between those two. I think if you could kind of purposely blend both together, automating their leads coming in or getting screened by automations, and then you're able to kind of talk to the important people that might have recurring income for the years coming up, right? And obviously this is a very kind of lawn landscaping, snow removal is very a very recurring business model, where you build that initial foundation and they're your customer for 10, 20 years down the road, right? So I think a lot of contractors, and obviously different industries are different. Roofing and fencing, let's say, is different than lawns and landscaping, where it's not necessarily a recurring basis, but there's a big referral play there, where if you install a fence for somebody and they've spent $25,000 on that now, and they're happy with that experience, well, they're going to pass on your name to all their neighbors and everybody else they know, because it's the one fence company they've dealt with and had a good experience with, right? So
Yeah, totally.
it's definitely an interesting take on different industries. Sorry, but that's why I enjoy the snow removal and kind of lawn landscaping side, is just that recurring business model where you just kind of build the foundation year over year over year, right? So, and I guess early on, did you have any kind of mentors or any other contractors that kind of helped you and guided you on making decisions on different business aspects?
Yeah, so your last question, I focused on the positive, but one maybe hard lesson I learned pretty quickly is that I didn't know how to price work correctly. And I didn't realize it fast enough. So there was a time period where I was underpricing work and was getting paid, and I'm like, why is there no money left? I didn't understand. I just didn't understand that it wasn't the same, and this is a few years in, but like it wasn't the same as when I was in college, just doing it in the summertime. I was happy with $30 an hour. I thought that was pretty cool. I was charging cost plus 10% on materials, which I thought was great, but it wasn't, and continuing that model once I had overhead and employees and stuff, I learned that one real quick. And that leads to answering your question, is I brought in a guy named Jim Houston, very long time green and snow industry consultant. I'm generally not a big fan of consultants. I think a lot of them are not great. I will say that Jim was great for me and for many others, and he just passed away. So fitting timing to bring his name up and memorialize him a little bit here. But I brought him in for a 2-day session where he deep dove on my business, on my books, got to know me as a person, got to know some of my staff, and he helped make budgeting make sense. So instead of it just being a P&L, which is sort of a reactive financial statement that you sort of build off of, he actually got granular with it and helped me understand what it cost me to send a truck and a trailer out of the yard in the morning, and how much cost I'm going to incur throughout the course of the day with that crew and with that equipment and with that overhead and with those materials, so that I could set an appropriate day rate for my 1, 2, and 3-man crews, which is not a way I'd ever thought about budgeting. When I was bidding and budgeting jobs, I would make an Excel spreadsheet and I would tack on a percentage, and I thought that was good. And it does work, but it's just not simple to understand. Once I understood throughput, and once I understood day rates, and how to properly mark up materials um, to cover for things like, you know, the fact that you waste materials, the fact that you don't always use 100%. Like, those are just simple little things that I wasn't thinking about. So he had a big impact on me, and understanding my numbers and my budgets much better. So he was a good one. And then the next big one I would say is that also inspired me to get into using software to track everything we were doing. Because I'm like, now I have all these cool numbers, but I don't know if I'm actually hitting them. So we signed up with Service Autopilot, which I think they're still around. We don't use them anymore. They got acquired a number of years ago. But so we got signed up with Service Autopilot, using their software to do all of our estimating, bidding, built all our rate matrices and our crew day rates into there. Also dispatched all of our work through that so that we could have our staff tracking actual materials and labor to make sure we were hitting our targets. And uh, through Service Autopilot, I also found out they had a networking group called Service Autopilot Academy, which is a bunch of other primarily young entrepreneurs like myself who had green and snow industry businesses that would get together on weekly calls to learn lessons. And then they'd get together 4 times a year to network and just learn from one another. So I joined that group, met a bunch of amazing, awesome people in that group, learned a lot from them. A lot of them were older than me. So I was able to fast forward and accelerate some years of mistakes by learning from mistakes they had made, which is great. But it also just really helped me understand the power of networking. Talk about customers and how important relationships are. I think when it comes to peers, it's also extremely important. Like, having those relationships, there's a lot of value that comes out of that as a human being and as a business owner. So learned a ton from these other guys, learned a ton from the founder of Service Autopilot, Jonathan Potoshnik, who had a very successful, large lawn care maintenance enhancement business down in Texas. So I would say those were kind of the two foundational early on groups or people that really had a huge impact on my trajectory.
Right on, right on. No, I think it's definitely important nowadays. If you want to kind of fast track, that learning curve within your own industry, to kind of lean on some others that have kind of laid the groundwork and have been there. Obviously, older folks that have been in business much longer than you are obviously kind of the ideal candidates. I know I've kind of multiple times over the last 3 years since I've kind of thrown myself into entrepreneurship, I've kind of leaned on some fellows to for help, and whether that's paid or unpaid, I think both are beneficial. Again, I think the whole consultant kind of word, I mean, unless it's clear that they've been in the industry for 10, 20, 30 years, depending on what the industry is and everything. But I think leaning on those type of people to just eliminate mistakes and save time and kind of just speed up that growth that you want within your own company is definitely a good thing, right? And it's not only just growing the company and growing revenue, but it's also kind of cutting out stuff that's not necessary, right? Cutting costs, cutting time it takes to do certain things.
Yep.
And I think it's there's a lot to learn from everybody else, and even people that aren't necessarily as advanced in their business career as you. Some people are just highly intelligent and they just kind of have it, right? And they've been in business maybe 5 years and kind of throw themselves into consulting, and they can kind of really throw some good value out there. So I guess fast forward to kind of your operations today there. No, go ahead.
I want to leave one note on that because I don't want to mislead anyone. Like, there are good consultants and there are good opportunities to hire people to help accelerate your business. So I don't want to discourage people. Like, I let off with, I don't generally like consultants, but there are good ones. You just have to really do your homework. Like, there are unfortunately more bad ones than good ones. Like, look at and the way you know if they're good is look at their book of work. Look at what they've actually done. Unfortunately, in our industry, I can think of multiple, I won't say any names, but I can think of multiple who are people who literally bankrupted their own green industry business and became a consultant. And like, that's not someone you want to take advice from. I'm sorry. It's just not. One of them, their pitch is like, well, I failed, so that's why I'm qualified to help you not fail. It's like, I don't like that. Like, I don't. So just be careful here hiring, and there are good ones. Do your research, do your homework, ask the right questions.
No, I would agree. I can't disagree with that. Yeah, I can't disagree. I think, and even for me, it's looking at companies that have grown extremely quickly within a couple of years. And they've only been in business, let's say 5 years, but they've grown the company up to 5 to 10 million. and then a couple of years later they end up crashing and burning. But in the meantime, they've kind of became a consultant because they've, essentially scaled their business up to this point. But I think there's a big difference between scaling a company up to 5 million over 5 years and scaling that up over 20 years, right? There's a lot more sustainability within a business that's grown over, a 20-year period incrementally. And not to say that some businesses scale quickly aren't successful, but there's just a sustainability portion there that I think hasn't been proven yet, right? So yeah, I guess fast forward to kind of today and the snow operations that you guys have today at Storm Equipment. Kind of how many crews you guys have and what different service areas. Kind of give us a rundown of what that looks like today.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I will provide a little context so this makes sense on why Storm Equipment even exists. So we spent most of the time talking about the contracting business, which makes sense. It's a snow contractor podcast, right? But the reason that Storm Equipment exists is because in 2014, we launched a brand called VSI, Voigt Smith Innovation, that was a result of us using liquid de-icing in our commercial snow and landscape business. So that business was called Smith Lawn and Landscape. That's the business we've been talking about on this podcast. But we had been using liquid de-icing in that business since 2010. We had good success with it. We had built all of our own equipment, home built, garage built. So in 2014, we launched a brand actually selling liquid de-icing brine makers and brine sprayers. Again, that brand was called VSI. That thing took off pretty quick. So over the course of 7 or 8 years there, that business actually substantially outgrew our service business because we were selling on an international scale. We're selling in Canada, US, gaining a lot of traction with that. And in 2022, we sold the brand name and the product patents and intellectual property rights for that product line, that liquid de-icing product line, to the Toro company, specifically the Boss Snowplow division. I think everyone's familiar with Toro and Boss. So when we did that, because they acquired that brand name, they allowed us to keep the non-liquid de-icing portion of that business manufacturing and equipment distributorship. We had to rebrand that to Storm Equipment. So that's why Storm Equipment came to exist. That's kind of the fast version, but that's good enough for this conversation. At the same time, we also divested from the green side of our Smith Lawn and Landscape business. So we quit doing the landscaping and lawn care work, and we continued focusing on the snow work. So at that time, we rebranded that business under the Storm Equipment umbrella. Again, it doesn't make sense to own a snow-only business that is called Smith Lawn and Landscape when we're not doing lawn or landscape work, right?
Right.
So we sold that brand, divested from that part of the business, continued doing snow just under the Storm Equipment name. So under the Storm Equipment umbrella, we have a business unit called Storm Snow Services, and that's where we perform our actual snow work in the Mankato, Minnesota area. And as far as the size, I honestly don't know the exact numbers. I am not the one that runs this part of the company. I'm more focused on the Storm Equipment side of things, but I want to say we're probably dispatching 35 to 40 people. It's probably covering a few hundred acres of pavement. And in an average winter, we're doing around $3 million in revenue. So that's kind of the size and scope of our actual service operation. So it's not huge. It's not small, but it's not huge. A lot of the customers we work with at Storm Equipment have much, much larger businesses than we do. And that's, we have a very tight operation. We operate in like a 7-mile radius. So we literally drive our loaders site to site to site. We don't plow with any trucks or very few trucks. So, for us to have a tight, dense route where we don't have to trailer anything is important. So we focus on a very small area. We've had opportunities to expand into the Minneapolis-St. Paul market, but we have a conflict of interest there because we have a lot of clients that we sell equipment to that operate in that market. And again,
Right.
the equipment business is much larger for us than the service business. The service business is foundational, extremely important. I think it's extremely impactful that we are snow contractors, that we go through all the same challenges and face all the same issues that our customers do. I think that makes us much more relatable on the equipment side. It's something we're very passionate about. It's something that's in our blood. But again, with a focus on population 60,000, there's a cap to what you can do in that size market. And again, we're not gonna expand into the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro or the Rochester metro and start competing with our customers who've helped us build up this brand.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely a good strategic move, right? It's especially if that part of the business is obviously much bigger. I think it's an interesting take, though, obviously, and having a an actual snow clearing division within, storm equipment, just to be able to, like you said, kind of be within the industry, know to be able to know the struggles, know the ins and outs of the equipment that you're using, and obviously testing some other stuff, right? Maybe some new products that are coming out. So that kind of gives you that flexibility to dive into that before putting things out in the market. So and
Yeah.
I guess in terms of equipment specifically, is there any kind of shifts within the commercial snow industry that you're seeing kind of nowadays?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty big one, actually. So if you think about our kind of the state of our society and economy, a lot of business is shifting to e-commerce. You look at companies like Amazon and just, I mean, look at their market cap and how big they've gotten the last 5 years, specifically since COVID. And unfortunately for a lot of brick and mortar, COVID was kind of their demise because people couldn't shop there. So they got in the habits of shopping online, and they realized it's really convenient to click a button and have stuff show up at your door 2 days later. So with the acceleration of e-com and with the I'd say light demise or even substantial demise of brick and mortar, what that means is that we're seeing a lot more large dry goods and whole goods distribution centers being built. So you're starting to see a lot more of these large industrial properties that have huge footprints. And where I'm going with this is because the real estate development landscape is shifting that way, it's forcing a shift in the way that we as commercial snow contractors do our work, because you're not going to plow a 40 or 50 acre site with plow trucks. You're going to use heavy equipment, iron tractors and loaders to plow those sites. So what we're seeing largely is a shift away from trucks and towards heavy equipment. That doesn't mean trucks are going away. I don't think trucks will ever go away, but I do think we're going to see proportionally a larger and larger quantity of heavy equipment, loaders and tractors pushing snow. And it's not just warehousing, it's also data. We talked about AI earlier, and look how many data centers are being built around North America. Like, just do a Google search. How many data centers are being built in North America? You'll be absolutely astounded how many data centers we're building. And those are also huge facilities and have huge parking lots and require large iron to plow those lots. So if we just look at some of the shifts in the way our economy works, that will show us the signs of what is going to get built, and what's getting built gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that means we need bigger and bigger equipment to handle it. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's the biggest shift I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think, like you said, the days of plowing big sites like that with pickup trucks are, obviously they're still there. There's still guys out there doing it. It's just, is it the most effective way? Most likely not. When you have equipment, much larger equipment. And I mean, obviously with Metal Plus coming out, they've got their whole airport division where they've got these 40-foot, blades. Some of the equipment is just incredible, honestly, for me, just to kind of look around at different companies and what they're doing. Obviously, Metal Plus is one of the big ones in terms of the bigger commercial stuff, industrial type of equipment. I think the only downside really to kind of having a bigger loader with a blade is just kind of that road speed getting from site to site, right? Compared to a pickup where they can kind of cruise down at 60 miles an hour, right? Or 100 kilometers an hour. So it's, I think that's obviously the main difference. But if you keep that radius tight enough and you've got good density and, a lot of those sites are kind of near each other at that point, it's a no brainer, obviously, to kind of go the heavier equipment route, right? Whether it be a loader or a bigger tractor. I know loaders are kind of the bigger thing on the commercial side, but we've had a couple, commercial companies in our area here that were going with pickup trucks, 2-3 pickup trucks, because they had them from the landscaping side. They end up purchasing or even renting a loader for the winter to be able to kind of, grab a little bit of density in the commercial industrial portion of our town to be able to kind of just have one there to do all those sites, and then have their pickups kind of do all the outliers around town, right? So
Yeah.
now in terms of you mentioned obviously the landscape, the online landscape has obviously changed, since COVID. What have you seen kind of on the, I guess, the client expectation and the client demand side, let's say today versus 8 years ago pre-COVID?
Yeah, I would say that just generally, this is maybe too general, but I'd say just generally society has become less patient, less understanding, and just less personal. Like, everything is less personal because we use so much technology to communicate. There's so many keyboard warriors that will destroy someone on a post or in an email, but to their face, they would never say a word. And I think that's sterilized our culture and society a little bit, to where, unfortunately, it's not always that expectations have shifted. It's that mentalities and forms of communication have shifted, which have sort of morphed themselves into expectational changes. Now, I will say generally, like as we advance and move through time here, like there certainly is more expectation for bare pavement more quickly. Like there's a safety and insurance issue here where when a slip and fall costs potentially millions of dollars, there's no tolerance for it. That didn't used to be the case. I mean, heck, people, at least in our market, like it used to be that they didn't even have you come and plow unless there's at least 3 or 4 inches of snow. Like they just let the snowpack build up and people walked on it. And like women in high heels just dealt with it, and it was what it was. And now it's like if you're not catching every snowflake, you're fired. So there has been expectational shifts there, but I do think that part of that is maybe not specifically that, but part of the issue and part of the expectational changes are just a lack of quality human to human communication. Like there's too much internet computer between humans, and it just doesn't create for relationships that are synergistic in working together to get things done the way they actually need to get done.
Right. No, I can't disagree with that. I think, obviously the internet changed quite a bit back in, the 90s and 2000s. And then obviously social media came around. I'm just over 30 years old, so I didn't really see the business landscape kind of pre-internet, pre-social media, but I can just imagine how different it was back then, and building those personal relationships and kind of just networking. That's kind of the way that it was done back then. There was no online, you can't just go online and start looking at people within your industry and kind of networking with them. You kind of had to go out and do it, right? You had to go to trade shows. You had to go to, other cities to be able to meet other guys in the same industry as you, right? So I think, online now, I know for us, for my company, I've only been in business for 3 years, so we haven't really seen that the pre-COVID or pre-social media kind of landscape, right? So we've kind of we're obviously thrown right into it, right? So, but I think we've kind of developed a pretty strong communication approach with our clients, and obviously being just on the residential side, there's obviously many differences between commercial snow and residential snow. Everybody thinks it's pretty much the same, but there's quite a bit that's different, not only on an insurance and liability level, but also just the client expectations, right? On a commercial site, you're dealing with a property manager or the owner, whereas on the residential side, you're dealing with each and every homeowner, right, at each individual property. Obviously, people, like you said, that societal shift with people kind of just being less patient and kind of the demands and wanting it done now versus in 1 or 2 hours has kind of changed all that. So I know for us, we, are pretty aggressive with our communication with our clients so that we get ahead and we're just proactive with things to the point where, I mean, I had an email, this year from a lady that said, listen, enough of your email updates, get me off the list because I don't need to know when you're coming exactly. I don't need to get all these emails, right? I think there was a bigger storm we had this year where we sent probably 7 or 8 emails within a 2-day period. Some people appreciate that. I think the fact that I only got one email saying, listen, you're annoying me with your emails, I kind of just laughed it off because I know many of our customers appreciate that, because even though some of them don't read it, that's fine. The ones that do read it do appreciate it, right? So I think there's different approaches definitely to commercial snow compared to residential, but I think on the commercial, it's still important to kind of keep an open line of communication with those property managers and people actually hiring you to do the work on those commercial sites, right? So now let's dive in a bit of into business and personal life balance. So how do you kind of maintain a good balance between, running a couple businesses and kind of your personal family time? I noticed obviously you've got several kids. So how do you manage that balance?
I would say for many years I didn't. For many, many years, I would say even for the majority of my entrepreneurial journey, I didn't balance at all. I worked 7 days a week. I worked sun up to sundown, making very little priority or time for my wife or young kids at the time. Definitely regret there, but it's in the past. It's done. I would say it was probably about 5 years ago that maybe it was when I turned 30 even. Like I realized, man, I'm 30. I'm not a kid anymore. I gotta act like a adult and be smart about stuff, not just work all day every day. Where I started putting some intentionality into time, prioritizing some time with my wife and kids. And I would say at the start it was pretty light, but it was better than what I was doing before, which was nothing. And I don't want to make it sound like I never saw him. I did, but it was like, in the morning before I leave for work, hi, how's it going? Have a great day. And when I get home, it's like, hey, good night, kids. Good night, wife. See you later. You know? But as I became more intentional about it, I learned that you just have to time block stuff out, and no matter what else is going on, unless it's an actual emergency, like someone at work has cut their arm off, like you just show up and you be there, because whatever you miss during that 3 or 4 hours that you would have been at work, whatever you miss is probably not that important, and the time with the family is. Because if you don't take the time to spend time with them now, then again, you'll only have time for regret later, and that's not a good thing. So some of the things that I've more specifically done is, first of all, I don't work weekends anymore. That does not mean I will not do any work on a weekend, but if I do, it's outside of my family time. Family time comes first. If, my kids are at a camp or something out of town, my wife is hanging out with her friends, like, yeah, I'll go to work because there's nothing else going on.
Mm-hmm.
But if the family's home, it's family time. Maybe after they go to bed on a Saturday night, I'll go back to the office and get some work done. But so weekends are for the family always. That's a big shift I made in the last 5-6 years here that has been very impactful. The other big thing I've done is this is more recent, probably like just the last 3-4 years here, is I have scheduled one-on-one time with each of my 4 boys. So I have 4 boys that I have twins that are 12, an 8-year-old, 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And they each get, a 3 or 4 hour time block of one-on-one time where it's their time. It's whatever they want to do. We'll go and do it. So that goes on the calendar. It's treated just like a work meeting. It's during work hours. That way I'm not taking away time from the rest of the family. Because if I just take them at night, then I'm just away from the rest of the family. It's not fair, right?
Right.
So this is during work hours, and we just go do whatever. It's not fancy. It's not like we're going to, flying somewhere, going to Disney World. It's like, let's go on a hike. Let's go on a bike ride. Let's go play baseball in the backyard. Just one-on-one, which is really cool. And that's just created a lot more intentionality for me around doing that. Actually, I just did one yesterday. Took off at 3:00 and took one of my boys golfing. Just that's stuff I never would have done before, but time goes way too fast. If you don't make the time for that stuff, you're going to sit back a decade later and go, man, I didn't do anything. Like what was I doing?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think most contractors, kind of deal with that. Obviously, some that are in their early 20s, mid 20s that don't have kids yet, that's when you kind of have to take the advice to listen, grind and work hard right now, because later in life, if you can set yourself up so that when you're 30, 32, 35 years old and you want kids, you're already established and you have that flexibility in the schedule to be able to, like you said, spend a few hours and really block out that time. I think, like you said, being intentional with that is kind of what's important, right? So making the effort to kind of block out your calendar and saying, hey, listen, we're going out and we're doing whatever you want to do that day. And I think golfing is a really great way to kind of spend time with your boys, right? Obviously, I've got a 4-year-old, so I'm not quite there yet to be on a golf course with him, but he plays t-ball. I coach his t-ball team. For me, I've kind of developed a passion for coaching baseball. I kind of grew up as a big baseball player and obviously playing hockey in the winter, but baseball was I won't necessarily share this with everybody, but I guess now I am. But baseball, I secretly like a little bit more than hockey. As a Canadian, a lot of my buddies will probably razz me for that, but that's okay.
That's right.
But yeah, I kind of put intentional time in the evenings. I coach my t-ball, my son on t-ball on Tuesday nights, and then I coach a separate team, which is rookie ball, kind of the level up on Thursday nights, where I don't have anybody on the team, and that's just kind of my time to give back to my own community, right? And that time is so enjoyable. I love it. You get out there and you're intentional with the kids and trying to be one-on-one with them as much as you can is obviously a little bit tough, but obviously having one child to have a bit of flexibility there to kind of spend time with other kids in my community, right? So which I love to do. So
well, and I would say I'm glad you brought up coaching, because that's something else I've started doing the last 3 years here. I think it's a really amazing, valuable opportunity. It's not one-on-one time with your kids, but to see, like, your kid's probably not quite old enough yet, but I've coached a few of my kids' football teams the last few years here, and like to see how proud they are that their dad is coaching all these other kids, but then also just for them to see the leadership that you can bring, like how you handle yourself coaching a bunch of kids, like that they learn from that too. Not that they don't learn when you just teach them that stuff in day-to-day life, but when they actually observe you coaching and teaching a whole bunch of other people, they learn even more from that than what they do from a normal course of life, because it's outside of the norm. It's not just the normal daily lessons or disciplines or whatever. It's like getting coached, watching their dad coach a bunch of other people. And then again, just it's not something I realized, but like I would hear my kids bragging like, "Oh yeah, my dad's coaching us." Like it just makes them really proud, and it's cool. So that's really great that you do that, and it's been a great opportunity for me as well.
And I think I think obviously a lot of contractors out there are kind of born leaders, right? Some of them aren't, some of them, are kind of antisocial and just want to do the work, right? But you have those, in my opinion, kind of those higher level type of people that want to grow and run a business. I think coaching is a good way to kind of be able to kind of put yourself in front of people and be the expert in a certain field, and to be able to kind of provide knowledge and education to others within that specific industry, as a business owner. And coaching is kind of that foundation where you can start, right? Obviously, starting with kids, there's a bit less pressure. You're not necessarily dealing with coaching adults or providing knowledge and education to adults, but starting with kids is always a good starting point, in my opinion, in terms of leadership skills, developing your communication. Obviously, there's parents there watching you as well, right? So it's not just the kids, it's the parents as well. And getting feedback. I know for me, I've reached out to parents that I've coached their kids and said, hey, listen, I want some feedback. I want, one thing I did well and one thing I didn't do well, this past season. And what do you think? Right. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room for improvement there on a personal level by giving your time like that. So, and I guess when do you ever take vacations, like actually full, 2-week long vacations? And if you do, are you still kind of on the phone half the time, or do you kind of really put that away, and are you really intentional with that time as well?
Yeah, again, it's a more recent thing, probably really the last 5 years. And part of that's just the age of the kids too. Like there is an age where traveling is extremely challenging and exhausting. And we had 4 kids, 4 and under at one point, and like we weren't going to travel then. It was insanity. So there was just a time period where it didn't make sense to travel. But yeah, the last 5-6 years we have done pretty regular family vacations. And I would say that I'm definitely not perfect about not working or being on my phone while on vacation, but I will say I'm much more intentional and careful about it now than I was even a couple of years ago. So, but yeah, we try to do at least one, if not 2 trips every year with the whole family.
Right on, right on. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Obviously, it's most of the answers I hear from contractors are, nope, I don't have time for vacation. I'm just working and that's it. So I would say, probably the majority of the answers I get out of that question are really, no, I don't take vacation, and it ends there. Right. So, no, I know we try as a family, we go up to the cottage quite a bit in the summertime over the weekend. So we don't necessarily leave for, a week, but over the long weekends, if you're there 3 or 4 days up at the cottage, I think this year we have about 5, maybe 6 weekends scheduled, from essentially in 2 weekends from now up until the long weekend in September, early September.
Nice.
And then in the winter time, the last 2 years, we've been lucky enough to be able to take a vacation down south for 5 days. So I kind of wait for a nice window of no snow. And ideally I'd like to leave, when there's no snow expected, but obviously you can't really plan that 5 days out. And obviously booking a trip last minute's never the smoothest thing that you can do. But I was away this past winter for one of the events, and I was pretty much just by the poolside with my laptop and in the software, looking at the map, watching the guys out there, and obviously wishing I was back home. But at the same time, it was kind of a nice moment to kind of say that I was down south, essentially running my snow business from down there. So it's a good experience for sure, but it was definitely stressful to not be there and not be involved. That was the first event we had this year where I wasn't actively within the town limits, I guess you could say. So definitely stressful, but definitely a learning experience for the future, just to know that I can do it. Right. So
Absolutely.
and then talking about, I guess, the future of storm equipment and kind of talk about, I guess, the vision that you kind of have for the next 2-3 years with that business, not only on the commercial snow side, but on the equipment side specifically.
Yeah. I mean, so everything we do at Storm is driven around our purpose, which is setting the future standard in snow. We kind of let off with the storm chasing thing, and I said why we're doing that. We also have an initiative called Storm Academy. It's a hands-on training grounds for snow contractors. Put in a large asphalt pad, put in a snowmaking machine, and we actually bring in contractors and we make snow so that they can learn their skills. We brought in a bunch this past winter. We brought in a bunch of people who had never operated a loader with a plow on it before, and we helped teach them and let them run a loader with a plow. Snow is a really hard thing to train because the only time you can get real practice is during snow, and during snow there's no time for training because it's snowing and we have to work. So what we've created with Storm Academy is a place where we can have an environment that we can control that allows us to bring in people and get training on their schedule, right? So that's one of the other things we're working on. But just generally, like with the content we create, with the initiatives that we launch, we're working on a bunch of stuff. I don't want to talk about it before it exists, so I'm not going to go into details there. But essentially, everything we're working on for both the short and the long term at Storm is all about advancing the industry, making the industry stronger, making the industry better, helping raise that bar so that it's just a better industry for all of us to work and live in. A lot of the work that we do is not monetized. Like we're not getting paid for Storm Academy. We're not directly getting paid for Storm Chase. And like we have a couple ad spots on there. We're not charging much for them. It doesn't even come close to covering the cost to produce that thing. I mean, very expensive to send film crews out all around the country on short notice when it's going to snow to do this stuff. And then, literally hundreds of hours of editing per episode. But the reason it benefits us long term is because when we can elevate the industry and provide value for the industry, that comes back around at some point. And not that it's just about trying to gain for ourselves, because it's not. Obviously, if it was, we'd be trying to monetize all this stuff up front. It truly is about just elevating the industry and getting it in a better place. Like I have a dream to see the snow industry look more like some of the more prominent trades like plumbing and electrical, where you have standards, you have higher pay rates, you have much more consistency in the way that the work's being priced. Like the example I always give is if you're pricing out a brand new commercial facility for a full plumbing install and you get 4 bids, they're probably within 10% of one another, right? That's because it's a standardized industry. You get the same 4 bids for snow plowing, you might have a 200% variation in that pricing. And that's because there aren't standards in our industry. And unfortunately, because we don't have a ton of respect from property owners and managers as an industry, a lot of the managers are going to take the price that's 200% cheaper because they don't care. Like it's not important enough to them for them to care. Whereas the plumbing, in their minds, it's like, oh, plumbing, it has to be great. We got to hire the right company. You got to get good people. We want to elevate the industry to the point where we're respected like what plumber would be, right? That's really the goal.
Yeah. No, I love to hear that. Honestly, for me, obviously starting this podcast, that's kind of the foundation that I want, is to just be able to provide value to others, not only starting out, but obviously trying to grow, a business, a contracting business, right? So I think we need more people within the snow industry specifically kind of leading the charge on that. So I'm really glad to hear that you guys are working on some stuff, and the Storm Academy, that's good news as well. I know I've kind of pondered on the idea of buying a snowmaking machine and going out to a bigger parking lot and kind of getting the guys' feet wet. And I think, like you said, the training within the snow industry, it's hard, right? Because unless you have that ideal climate to be able to kind of produce some snow, and you wait for those colder nights and run that snow machine overnight and get the guys to come in early morning before it's melted down the next day to kind of train before the season, right? I know for us, we get some pretty cold nights without snow in kind of October, November timeframe. But a lot of times we haven't had a snow event in the last 3 years that's been in November. They've all been in December. But that cold weather comes around in October, November, to where you can kind of, invest in some equipment to be able to make some snow and at least get the guys out blowing, and just obviously for us it's blowing, not pushing. But there's different types of snow can act differently in a snowblower, right? So there's a lot of training there that's kind of needed before hitting that big heavy wet storm, which for us is kind of the big problem. The dry snow is usually pretty easy. It's nice to get an event like that early on so the guys can at least get used to kind of just blowing snow under normal -5 to -10 conditions. But as soon as you get to that 0 degree, I'm talking Celsius here as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Once you get to that, close to that, the snow ends up getting so heavy, you end up clogging your blower, and until you hit that first heavy wet snow event as a new operator, you're gonna learn the hard way. That first time you clog, and then after that, it's just kind of learning, with the feel of the machine, right? But if you can fast track that and have ideal environments where they can train and get used to their equipment and get proficient, I think the industry kind of needs a little bit more of that. So I'm glad to hear that Storm Academy is, you guys are kind of, starting that out and at least getting some training out for other people to kind of utilize those resources, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
And I guess in the next let's say decade, what type of developments or shifts do you see within the snow industry specifically?
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, I think we'll continue to see a major shift towards larger and larger sites. So I think that you'll see less overall sites with a lot more pavement volume. I think with that, we're going to see more and more consolidation in our industry. So you're already seeing companies get acquired by private equity and by Brightview, and some of these big players. Really, since 2021, it's just been rapid fire, just acquisition, 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 roll up. The way that capitalism generally works is exactly that. As an industry matures, you get consolidation, and less companies do more and more of the work. I mean, I think agriculture is a great example. And this is rewinding really far back, but agriculture started off as sustenance farming, where everyone had a farm in their backyard and that took care of their family and that was it. Well, then they started growing more and selling it to other people. And then they got more and more and selling it to more and more people. And then they started selling it to grain elevators. And now the state of farming, like at least in the US, I don't know about Canada, but at least in the US, corporate farms are 90% of the farming in the US. Like these are 10,000 acre minimum size farms that you're seeing. And actually 10,000 would be a very small farm now. You don't have a lot of your guys that are out there farming 200 or 300 acres. They still exist, but it's consolidation, right? It's less and less companies or business units doing more and more of the work, because the way capitalism works is that the higher volume you can do, the more efficient you get, and the more efficient you get, the more money you can make, and the cheaper you can keep pricing. So I think we're going to see more consolidation in our industry, not only in the sites we're serving, but in the number of providers that are doing it. I think we're going to continue seeing providers spread out to wider and wider swaths, because technology is allowing on-site cameras with analytics. Like ease of scaling stuff outside of a small little bubble is just getting easier and easier with technology. I think you asked about 10 years, right? You said 10 years. We're absolutely going to see automation coming into our space. I don't think we're at risk of automation taking over our space. Like if you're a loader operator or truck operator, I don't think we're at risk of you totally losing your spot. But I think that you might have a automated loader or truck that plows next to you and does some of the basic work. You might do all the complex cutouts and back drags and stuff, and a autonomous machine just takes all the snow from the center windrow of the parking lot and pushes it into the pile over and over. At Storm, we actually invested in a skid steer that has autonomy built in just to test this. I bought it a couple of years ago and have been testing it, and it's definitely not ready for prime time, but it's still pretty amazing what it can do. You can teach it a path and it will just follow that path over and over and over all day, and it doesn't need an operator. So the technology's there, it's coming. I mean, we see it on the roadways. There's self-driving cars, there's robo taxis, like that stuff's coming. And I think a decade's extremely reasonable. I think sidewalks are even easier for autonomy than parking lots are. I know there was a company a number of years ago, Left Hand Robotics, that attempted some autonomy on sidewalks, and they got acquired by Toro, and I think Toro repurposed the technology into their autonomous mowers. So I wasn't even talking about green. I mean, I think in the green industry, I think automation is going to be massive. It's way more consistent, way easier than snow. I was more focusing on snow, but I think we're going to see automation coming into the space for sure.
No, I completely agree. I think, I mean, you see a lot of farming equipment nowadays as well. That's kind of automated when they're just on a path up and down, the cornfields, right? It's a little bit easier for the automation to kind of stay consistent, right? So, yeah, I think within a decade, we're for sure going to see that, within 10 years from now. It's just a matter of at what scale and how much of like percentage of your business is automated in that way, right? Like you said, a little bit more of the sensitive areas to clear. I think there's not going to be necessarily automation hopping on that right away. I think you're always going to need manual operators to kind of do that work. But yeah, we'll see what the next decade holds. But that kind of leads me kind of to the AI kind of segment here. So what are you guys incorporating any type of AI solutions or tools within your business today?
Yeah, I'd say that we are using it to a pretty basic level. So we're using it to just make routine tasks more efficient. We're using it to proofread, using it to help generate alternate ideas to ideas we've provided it. Primarily ChatGPT, also Grok. We are using some automations in our CRM software to automate follow-ups and follow-up reminders. We're trying not to use it so much that it causes us to lose personal touch, because I do think that's a risk. But yes, we are using it. We also have started experimenting with it for site takeoffs and estimating. It's actually pretty amazing after a little bit of coaching how accurate it can be with that. So I think there's a lot of potential with doing takeoffs and estimating with it. So yeah, we're using it. And actually, it's ironic timing you're asking this. Just last week, I was having a discussion with my co-founder at Storm, Phil, about having a training course for our employees, just so that they understand its capabilities and where we want them to use it and where we don't, how we want them to use it and how we don't. Because you hear all these people saying like AI is coming for your job or whatever. It could be if you're not using it at least a little bit, right?
Yeah.
The way that I kind of look at AI is that it can take a great employee and it can increase their output 2 or 3 times. Like it doesn't replace that great employee. It just makes them way more effective. And I think if that's the way we look at it, it's a great tool. I think we also don't like looking at it as a tool to do our work for us. It's a tool to make the work that we're doing better. Like for anyone that hasn't used it or it's only lightly experimented with it, like if you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. It still makes a lot of mistakes. It still gives inaccurate information. It still interprets things wrong. So like if you're lazy and you just say, write me an email to my boss about how I'm not coming to work today or something, like, okay, it can probably do that. That's pretty basic. If you tell it, make a in-depth proposal for my client and I want to make sure it has these plants and flowers and whatever, and it gets more complex, it's got all these takeoffs, like you got to check the work there. It's not totally perfect. But if you coach it a little bit, it can get perfect really quick. So my point is like effort in is quality of product out. And then primarily just that I think everyone probably should be using it to some level. I don't think we should view it as a threat. I think we should view it as an opportunity.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Honestly, I think, obviously I kind of feel like it's somewhat similar to kind of when social media started back in the mid to late 2000s, right? It's something that's new. It's coming out. Not as many people are necessarily using it, but eventually I think, like you said, it's the difference between an employee who is knowledgeable on AI versus an employee that isn't. I think that's where the big difference is going to be going forward. I don't think it's necessarily, like you said, taking over jobs where AI is completely eliminating jobs altogether. But if you look at just an administrative assistant or executive assistant as an example, that some people think that eventually, AI is going to take over those positions. I don't think that'll fully happen. I think a lot of the duties can be taken over by AI, but I think the admin assistant that is knowledgeable and is using AI on a daily basis is going to be staying in that company. And it's
Absolutely.
a matter of just, instead of having 3 or 4 assistants, you have just the one who is extremely knowledgeable in AI and is able to, like you said, have a 2-3x output with the work that they do. And it's not only some of the work, but it's the creativity that kind of comes behind it, right? Like bouncing ideas off of somebody versus bouncing it off of AI. There's a lot of benefit there. But again, it's not perfect, right? And I think a lot of what you input is a reflection of what the output's going to be, right? If, like you said, you write an email with this and you're just kind of keeping it to a one-liner, it doesn't have enough context to really provide an educated response, right? Whereas if you really, I think prompting in AI is huge. I think if you can just train employees on ideally prompting in a way that is beneficial for them and is time saving, and these prompts you can save and create documents with a bunch of different prompts and then just kind of plug and play, right?
Yep.
I think that's where it's really beneficial. I think the employees that are trained on that are going to outlast the ones that aren't, right? So I think that's where the big difference is. So I guess overall you're feeling pretty excited about AI in the next few years. It's not something that kind of makes you nervous, because I know a lot of contractors are nervous and kind of scared about it, right? But for yourself, obviously this is a bit more of an exciting opportunity rather than something to be scared of, right?
Yeah, I think that anyone that's scared about it just maybe hasn't realized how simple it is to start using, or maybe they're nervous about it just because they haven't done anything with it yet and they have a little bit of FOMO, like they've been left behind. It's not too late. Like it's kind of like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, right? Like everyone's like, oh, it's too late. It's already this expensive now. Like it's probably not too late. It's probably going to be way, way bigger. Like with the internet, when the internet came out or when social media came out, like people 10 years later thought, oh, I'm way too late. No, it's only getting bigger, right? Same thing with AI. Like you're not too late. We're in the early adopters phase still. Got plenty of time.
Completely agree. Right on. Well, let's kind of dive into this last segment that we have here, which is just kind of a rapid fire type question. So what's the most valuable business advice that you've ever had shared with you?
Good question. It's really simple, really, really simple. Always do the right thing. It's maybe more of life advice, but in business, like unfortunately, so many people are so money driven in business that it causes them to not do the right thing. And sometimes that can create a payday in the short term, but in the long term, it never pays off. On the contrary, doing the right thing in the moment might cost you money, which sucks. And sometimes you need the money and it really sucks to do the right thing and not sell someone the thing they don't need or not cut the corner that saves you a few bucks. But in the long term, that always pays off. And I've always lived by that. Our core values of our business are built around that. And I think there's a broader meaning behind it, but just if you always do the right thing in the long term, it's always going to pay off. And at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about how I started really young and that gave me a big advantage. always doing the right thing for the long term gives you a huge advantage, because you don't have sort of that guilt complex built up behind decisions you've made in the past about things you've screwed up that might come back to bite you later.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that's great advice. And unfortunately, I don't think enough contractors kind of think that way. Unfortunately, it's an industry that's kind of known to have, scummy people. And I know for us in our area, we've got, contractors that kind of hop from Montreal to Ottawa to Toronto, and they kind of just, they're just out there scamming people, right? So I don't think we have enough, kind of transparent and high integrity type contractors out there. And the ones that are there kind of have to put themselves out there and give that advice to others just to be able to kind of uplift the industry as a whole, right? So
Yeah.
name one tool or piece of equipment that you absolutely cannot live without.
I would say for us, hydraulic wing plows in our commercial snow operation. When we started using Metal Plus plows in 2016, literally double their throughput per loader. I know they're expensive, and I know I'm biased because now we sell them. But even before we ever sold them, like, I'll never forget checking the data. At this point, we're using LMN to track our snow operation. I remember pulling up the LMN chart, and Brady Lux, who still works for us, was the operator, who was running the 3013 Metal Plus plow for the first time. And he cut his route time in half. And I thought there had to be a mistake. I knew it was going to be a good plow. It looked like a good plow. But so I called him and just said, like, did you skip sites or what? Why so fast? He's like, no, this plow is amazing. Can do everything. I'm so much faster. It's so much more agile. And so we scaled it through the entire company, and we literally were able to go from 24 power units. When I say power units, I mean trucks and loaders, to do our entire route. We were able to go down to 11. So for anyone that says a wing plow is expensive, yeah, it's expensive compared to a push box. But guess what's more expensive? The thing that pushes it. And if you can cut the number of those in half, or you can take the ones you have and double the productivity, that's not expensive. That's a good investment.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I know I haven't looked obviously into blades that much, obviously, because that's I'm more on the inverted snowblower model, obviously. But I know with Metal Plus coming out with a bunch of different products and stuff, obviously they're constantly innovating. And Norman, actually, the blowers that I have, they were bought out by Metal Plus, right? Yep. So there's obviously a connection there with some of the innovation that they're putting out, that Norman is putting out specifically. Next year, I'm actually going to be testing an inverted blower with a hydraulic wing on it, essentially. Yeah. So it's just a wing that it's not back and forth, essentially, where you can box it and then back drag as well. It's really just the wing that comes out, but it just essentially adds another 30-inch essentially to your blower. Right now, yeah, you might have to drive a little bit slower, but I think the time savings on performing 5 or 6 passes in a laneway instead of 2, 3 or 4, you're that much more efficient there in terms of time, right? So we're excited to start that next year, and obviously that kind of comes from Metal Plus themselves, right? So
yep.
Right on. So last question, if folks want to kind of get a hold of you and maybe check out some of your work, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on social media, specifically Facebook and LinkedIn. I have Instagram. I'm not the best at using it or checking it, but I'd say feel free to add me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or just cold message me. I reply to everyone, unless you're spamming me trying to sell me something that I don't. But if you legitimately are a contractor and or another OEM manufacturer of equipment, you just want to chat, I love talking to people. That's why I'm sitting here talking to you. I love doing this stuff. Learn.
Right on.
I've learned from you today. I learned from everyone I talk to. Feel free to reach out. I know for some people, I've been doing this long enough people know me that some people get intimidated to reach out or talk to me at a trade show. I'm super approachable and I like talking to everyone. So if you're one of those, come find me. I go to all the major trade shows. I'm at SIMA. I'm at Equip Expo. I'm at a lot of regional and smaller shows as well. If you see me at one of those things, come chat.
Right on. Well, thanks a lot. No, I know you were pretty receptive when I first reached out, and obviously we didn't really know each other that much apart from being Facebook friends before, yeah. Right? So I definitely appreciate you coming out and spending your time with me today to kind of share some insights into the commercial snow industry with our audience today. So I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Right on. So to all the contractors tuning in, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the channel, and join us next time with another blue-collar entrepreneur breaking down their path to success. And until then, keep grinding and keep building.